Once upon a time, long, long ago, there was a city whose name most people have forgotten. It was called Velmosa. It is now in the middle of the desert under the sand, not even on the maps. No one knew there was a city there. But some of the people who lived there used to dream about it. In ancient times, the people of Velmosa were very wise. They knew the shape of the stars and what they were. They could decipher the meaning of dreams. They could heal diseases with herbs. But most important of all, they had something to hide. At the very bottom of the city, 3 doors were found, sealed with stones and walled up for a long time. There was no clear information about these gates, but the people always said, "Those who go near the 3 gates will never be the same. Either they cannot come back or they find themselves there." These sayings are so old that some people believe it is just a fabrication and others believe it is a legend. But there was one person who kept turning these words over in his head and thinking about them. His name was Tayron. Tayron grew up with the nomadic people on the edge of the desert. When Tayron was young, his mother and father were lost in a sandstorm. Tayron grew up with an old woman who told him, "You did not come into this world easily, Simone," but never told him the details. But Tayron always asked questions and was curious but never got an answer. A long time passed and Tayron was 17 years old. Sometimes he would lie down and look up at the sky and think of the 3 doors. They were silent and motionless, but Tayron thought and felt that they were calling. He kept seeing the doors in his dreams, and he felt as if he was getting closer and closer to them. One day he heard a sound in his sleep at night. Thick and slow, as if coming from under his bed, a voice said, "The doors will speak to you when you forget that name you keep hidden." Tayron woke up and wiped his forehead with his hand. He sweated profusely, panted, and threw himself outside and looked up at the sky. Then he had a feeling. This time he would stop thinking and get going. On the morning of the next day, he packed his bag with some food, some water, and the stone compass he had inherited from his great-grandfather. He left the camp unannounced. He set off in the scorching heat of the sun. Tayron didn't know where he was going either. He just walked in the direction he felt. 2 days passed. His feet were sore, he was tired, and most importantly, he was low on water. But on the morning of the 3rd day, he saw a small stone floor. Tayron pushed the sand away with his hands and opened the stone floor completely. On the stone was a very old, almost faded symbol, a spiral. Tayron was very excited. "Is this it?" He felt a shiver as he put his hand on the stone. The stone felt warm. He started digging around it using his hands. After about 10 minutes of digging, he realized that the stone floor was a lid. The lid was very heavy and he tried to lift it, and he managed to lift it with great difficulty. There was a tunnel leading inside, but it was dark and silent, and Tayron, without thinking, went down into the passage. The passage ahead was cold and narrow. Tayron kept walking, rubbing his hands against the wall. As he walked, there were symbols on some of the stones, but Tayron could not read them. It was very quiet inside. It was as if the whole world was silent. He went down for minutes. The passage was long. After walking for a while, he came to a big door. This door was the same as the stone doors in the desert, only it had a spiral symbol on it. He pushed the door and it opened with no difficulty. Inside was a big round hall. In the center of the hall stood 3 large stones. All 3 had different symbols on them. But in front of the center stone, something was shining, a small stone tablet. Tayron took the tablet in his hand and saw that there was only one line of writing on it. Remember that every door is a way. Know that the only door that leads to the right path is your reality. The tablet trembled and then cracked. At that moment, the stones in the center of the hall receded and 3 doors rose from their places. Real doors. The first door was dark and jet black like a dark shadow. The second door was a white door, very bright and shining. The surface of the third door was constantly moving like liquid, and the door was gray. Tayron was very excited and froze. "These doors are just like the ones I saw in my dream," he said. At that moment, a voice came from inside him. This time, not from outside or from someone else, but from inside himself. Familiar but foreign. The voice said, "The dark path will show you the truth, but you may not be able to carry it." Tayron reached for the first door. His heart was beating fast with excitement and his palms were sweaty. Just as he was about to touch it, he paused. But then he took a deep breath and touched the door. In that moment, everything changed. When Tayron put his hand on the first door, it was as if time had frozen. There was no sound, no light. Darkness, just darkness. But the darkness was not empty, as if something was hidden inside, waiting to come out. The air was suddenly cold, not the stone floor, but soft sand beneath his feet. But it wasn't the cold of the desert, it was the cold of a damp, foggy valley. As his eyes slowly adjusted, he could see his surroundings. It was familiar but unfamiliar. Somewhere inside, he felt a sense of where he was. This was Velmosa as it used to be, before it was buried in the sand. Everything seemed normal. People were walking, children were playing, birds were drinking from buckets of water. Women dressed in colorful clothes and men with long beards were walking slowly. As Tayron made his way through the crowd, his eyes fell on one place. In front of a house, a woman was holding a pitcher and handing water to a child. The child's smile. It was very familiar to Tayron, and his heart beat with excitement, because that child was Tayron himself. But there was something strange. The woman and the man next to her were also calling the boy Tayron. But this child was not him. It wasn't his childhood. That's when he realizes, this is another life. Maybe this is what it should be. Maybe Tayron, who was never really lost and grew up with his family. Her feet are pulled back. Her eyes welled up, but she couldn't cry. Because this was not just a dream. This was the reality that the first door showed him. A truth between possibilities. Just like the voice inside her told her, and a voice echoed from the sky. A voice only he could hear. Every truth has a weight you can't carry, but some crush you. Tayron couldn't look any longer. He turned off the side of the street and walked away. This time he found himself in a large square. In the center stood a giant mirror as if fixed to the ground. He approached the mirror. He thought he could see himself, but no. All he could see in the mirror was only emptiness, nothingness, not even a shadow, no reflection, no image of the outside, just an empty, dark void. That's when he realized, the truth whispers that sometimes you doubt your own existence and think you're imagining things. He shuddered inside. He didn't want to stay here for long. He wanted to go back. But the place he came from no longer existed. The mirror began to shake and spiral shapes emanated from it. Voices started to come. All the voices were saying her name, but in different languages, in different tones. Some were shouting, some were crying, some were whispering. At that moment, Tayron realized it was the labyrinth in his head, not the reality of the past. Finally, a light emanated from the mirror and he sank back into the darkness. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "Who am I?" he said to himself. "Do I really exist?" he questioned. This question remained unanswered for the moment. Then the ground beneath his feet turned to stone again. The hall came back and the 3 doors were in front of him again. Tayron's eyes were slightly misty with tears, but he kept walking. After the first door, he felt a weight on his shoulders. But the weight did not weaken him. On the contrary, it made him stronger and more confident. He turned his eyes to the second door. This door was white, but its glow gave off a clean light like a very old cloth. He approached it and it opened just as silently as the first door. When he stepped inside, this time nothing happened. No light, no sound, just silence. He was not disturbed by this sound. It was as if the voice inside him was saying, "Listen." Tayron kept walking, and after a while he found himself in the middle of a meadow that seemed to go on forever. And when he looked around, he saw a table behind him. There was a man sitting at the head of the table. Tayron had never seen this man before, but he felt he recognized him. The man looked up and smiled. "Welcome," he said. "I've been waiting for you for a long time." Tayron was about to open his mouth when the man gestured. Tayron fell silent. There were 3 items on the table: a watch, a broken mirror, an empty book. "I have brought you time, reflection, and your story," the man said. "The second door will show you what happened." When Tayron looked at the clock, he realized that the hands had gone backwards. When he looked in the broken mirror, he saw not himself, but people he didn't know. When he turned the pages of the book, he saw his own thoughts written on the blank pages. At that moment, he realized that this door does not promise the future. On the contrary, it shows that the future is in me. "I can't tell you who you are," said the man, "but I can show you what you can be." Suddenly, everything disappeared like a cloud of dust. The meadow disappeared, the table disappeared, the man disappeared. Everything disappeared like the wind. Tayron was back in the hall. His eyes were fixed on the 3 doors. 2 were now extinguished, but now, the third. Tayron waited a long time in front of the 3rd gate. It was not easy to pass through the first 2 doors. He had left something inside each door he entered. The first door had made him question his past. The second door had left him uncertain about the future. But the 3rd door, he didn't know it, and he was a little scared but very curious. This door had no light, no darkness, no eeriness. It was gray, plain. But that's exactly why it scared Tayron, because it had a different feeling than other doors. He took a deep breath. He put his hand on the door. It was not cold, it wasn't hot. The door was just there. And suddenly, just like any other door, it opened silently. Tayron entered slowly. This time there was no burst of light or a different world. There was only nothingness. No sky, no ground, nothing. It was as if he was in space in the middle of nowhere, not even the sound of his own footsteps. Tayron was scared. At that moment, a small light appeared right in front of him like a glow. It grew as he got closer, and out of the light came another Tayron. This was Tayron in his old age. His face was old and wrinkled, his shoulders slumped with age. But there was something familiar in his eyes. The old Tayron spoke. "This is the last stop for you." But for me, it was the beginning. Young Tayron could not say anything. He just stared. The old one continued. These 3 gates were a legacy left to the people of Velmosa long ago, but the people forgot the importance of these gates. I had to wait until one of our descendants could find the gates again. Tayron was surprised and asked, "Was this a test?" Old Tayron smiled. Number it was a reflection. 3 places where you see yourself. The gate of the past, the gate of the future, and the gate of the present. Tayron stopped and said, "Now." "Yes," said the old one. "This 3rd door shows only the now. Do you just exist as you are, not knowing what will happen? Without clinging to the past, without holding on to the future, just now." Tayron looked around for a moment. The nothingness suddenly made sense. This emptiness reflected the silence of his mind, his fearlessness, or on the contrary, his fears. The older Tayron put his hand on the younger one's shoulder. "The one who will open the gates. You are here and you are ready." "Am I ready?" asked Tayron. Why?" "To see the truth," said the old one. "Now you can take the first step towards the rebirth of Velmosa." At that moment, old Tayron slowly disappeared like a cloud of dust. The void disappeared with him. He came back into the stone hall. Only one of the 3 doors remained, the gray one. The other 2 had disappeared, having completed their mission. Tayron was left alone, but he was no longer alone. He had a feeling. He didn't even know what it was that he had felt missing before, but now it was with him. In the center of the hall with the doors, a large pendulum began to slowly descend from the ceiling. This pendulum, decorated with spiral patterns, had not been there before. As the tip of the pendulum approached the floor of the hall began to light up. The carved lines between the stones filled with light. The spiral symbols began to move. Just below the pendulum, an inscription appeared on the floor. "A whole is complete with 3 things: mind, time, and spirit." Tayron knelt down. He placed his hands right above the spiral symbol. He closed his eyes. And at that moment, Velmosa's long-awaited voice was heard. "This long sleep is over." The stones trembled. The walls of the hall shook, but Tayron was not afraid. Because this was not destruction, it felt like a rebirth. The knowledge, secrets, and forgotten voices beneath Velmosa were now stirring. The doors would no longer open to anyone else, because they had completed their mission. The only one who could open them now was himself. Tayron had found wisdom within himself, not outside. Tayron stood up. He left the hall with the burden of the past on his shoulders, the emptiness of the future in his hand, and silence. Tayron's story did not end here. It was only the beginning. Velmosa awoke, and with him the ancient wisdom began to awaken. Each waited for his own door. Perhaps one day, someone else would appear, and the doors whispered words again. Some are lost. Some find themselves.